Good evening, welcome to this video. Trusting everybody's exceptionally well. Tonight's topic is an interesting one, and it is a topic of great depth, potential controversy, and of course, laden with deep history. And today's live feed, I've been thinking about this the last few hours, and I've been thinking about this today, and thinking about really feeling into what does it mean to be a man in today's society. And of course the answer isn't straightforward. There's no singular answer. There is no one size fits all response. Tara, wonderful to have you here. But there are some generalizations that we can begin to observe, yeah? Shavana, welcome, thank you. If you're just coming on, please place number 1 in the comment box so that I know that you're here, and maybe an emoticon to let me know how you're feeling and how receptive you are to just being open today, yeah? Wherever you are in the world, Tia, welcome, thank you for being here. So today's message is deep. Catherine, hey, how are you? Lovely to have you here, thank you so much. So now, of course, as those of you that have been on many of my live feeds before know that, Nicole, welcome, know that, of course, I speak to both men and women in as much equilibrium as possible, in as much balance and harmony as possible, because I believe that as a man in this world, it is important, A, to connect with men, but to understand male issues or masculine issues as well. But of course, it's imperative and equally as important that we understand female issues, feminine issues as well. But today's live feed is really about men, is really about who we are, where we've come from, how we navigate this world, and how doing so, how we've been culturally conditioned over lengthened periods of time, and how this conditioning really affects and impacts and impedes the way we actually deal with self and with others in relationship. Emma, hi. So what did Andrew say here? I'm not going to lie, I first read that as how to make love to a man instead of how to love a man. That may mean I have things to work through. Anyway, much love, bro. Much love to you as well, Andrew, always. Anya, hello, how are you? Hey, Joni, how are you, my dear? Hoping you're very well. Hoping everybody's exceptionally well. We're going to get into some depth here this evening. So I'm obviously going to come from a male perspective. I was born a man, I am a man still. I'm going to come from a male perspective. I'm going to come from also not just a male perspective or the perspective of a man growing up in a particular culture, of course, a Western culture with a particular ethnic influence as well. But of course, I'm going to do my best to come from a place of empathy and connection. And I think in the last live feed we spoke to, I think I asked you all that were on that last live feed, which was a couple of days ago. Francesca, welcome. Sky, welcome. I mentioned, what is your superpower? What is your great superpower as an individual? And for those of you that weren't on the last live feed and you didn't get that, I'll ask you again, and maybe, and even those that were on, and you could answer this. What is your grand superpower? And there is a relevance to what we're speaking to this evening. But what is your greatest superpower as a person, as an individual? What do you give the world? What do you give yourself? What gift do you give yourself into the world? And then someone asked me that, and I said I feel one of my superpowers is empathy, is connection, is being able to connect with people in a very particular way. So this live feed is awesome, Tara, beautiful. This live feed in particular is really about us looking beyond just where we are boxed in our own cultural norms, but to see beyond that as well and to have wisdom beyond that. And we can all tap into that wisdom. We simply need to observe with a very sincere intent, a deeply sincere intent, observe life with a deeply sincere intent. And then be with that. Allow that information that streams to us to assimilate within our own being. And we cultivate a wisdom. We cultivate a knowledge around things, around experiences, events, circumstances, relationships, and so forth that occur in our outside world, yeah? So let me know what your superpower is. It's just an interesting point to contemplate. And if you're just coming on, place number 1 in the comment box so that I know that you're here. And if you're new to these live feeds, place new in the comment box so that the tribe can welcome you and the community can welcome you. Jolene, welcome. Okay, so what do men need? What do men need? So this is specifically in love and relationship and not only intimate relationship, but we will focus more on intimate relationship, of course, but also on, welcome ladies, thank you for being here. Lisa, welcome. How are you? Good to have you here. Can we please welcome Lisa here? That would be wonderful. And Emma says, from memory, you said connection, your ability to love all parts of yourself. Another one of my superpowers is a fantastic memory as well as my intuition. Awesome. Great memory. Better than mine, based on that. So how do men need to function effectively, to function openly in relationship? And how do we do this? By receiving what we need, therefore giving what we're able to give. And what do we need to feel in relationship in order to be the best and the grandest version of self? So, as always, I wish to put this onto you. And I'd love to hear your thoughts, your wisdom on this, especially both men and women that are out there in the audience this evening, is what do you feel men need in order to be the best version of themselves in relationship? Now, of course, we need to some degree, define what the best version of relationship means, or the best version of self in relationship, in relating to ideas, to beliefs, to self, to others, to intimate relationships, to children, to family, to friends, to colleagues, etc. So let me be really clear when I say best version of self in relationship. So let me define relationship for you, and I just did that. It's not just an intimate relationship. Primarily, it's relationship to self. Then it's relationship to earth, relationship to our intimate partnerships, relationship to all things, to ideas, to belief systems, to people, colleagues, friends, family. So what do men need from others, from their peers, from their loved ones, from their family, from their intimate partnerships, in order to flourish and be this grand version of self? And of course, I'm going to open that up this evening. I'm going to provide some of what I feel based on my own personal experiences, but also I delve into this space deeply, based on what I feel is necessary for men to flourish based on our own socio-cultural, socio-economic conditioning, the historical context by which we come from as men and women, of course, and how that has influenced our behaviors and the way we view the world, our models of reality, and the way we feel about ourselves, and therefore the way we actually interact with others as well. So it becomes quite complex and integrated and deep, beautifully deep, but can be very complex. So we've got some answers so far, some responses. Emma says, someone who nurtures them, listens to them, supports them, makes them feel needed, wanted, unconditional love. Beautiful, beautiful. And I'll go into the why behind that as well. And Joni says, permission to be themselves without the social expectation and pressure to be a man. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. To feel trusted and to lead. Yeah, or to feel trusted to lead, sorry. Yeah, beautiful. So these and more are so important. These factors, these points that we're making now. So Catherine says, hold space for them to trust and to share their deep feelings and fears without judgment. And essentially, when we look back, I did a live feed on this. It would have been a couple of months ago now on three major fears that men have, and it's fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, fear of being ridiculed. These are three core fears that men face, and they stem from men growing up in a hyper-masculine world, men growing up in a masochistic world, essentially, and men growing up in a patriarchal society, an unhealthy, distorted patriarchal society. Now, of course, women grow up in this society as well. But remember, today's live feed is about men. We're just focusing on men this evening, yeah? So this need to be seen and this fear of abandonment, this fear of being rejected, this fear of not being understood, of not being connected to, of not being seen and not being known. It's a common thread in our society for both men and women, particularly for men in this particular space. As men, we are not taught how to feel. In fact, we're taught the antithesis of this. And I'm definitely speaking to a Western cultural framework here, and I'm generalizing. So I want to be very clear about that. Not all men don't have a capacity to feel or express their emotions. In my own life experiences as a child, I had capacity to express myself, but at the same time, in the same token, it was a double-edged sword. I would be crucified in many ways for the expression that I partook in. I would be judged and ridiculed for that. Now, that was my interpretation of some of my life experiences. Of course, I am also deeply blessed for the life that I've had in many different ways. But as men, we are encouraged not to express ourselves. As men, we are encouraged not to feel. That feeling is a weakness. And if we are engaged in weakness, we will not be loved. We will not find love. We will not be able to connect to love. We will not be a man. Now, if you can resonate with that, place a number 2 in the comment box, please. And any thoughts and feelings that you have on that as well, yeah? Thank you, Tina. Appreciate that. So as men, we're really discouraged to express ourselves. We're discouraged to say, hey, this is to verbalize how we feel. Now, by verbalizing our feeling, yeah, by verbalizing who we are, how we choose to interact with the world and in love and in intimate relationship, by expressing that, we become exposed, we become vulnerable. Now, vulnerability is something that is not cherished in a masculine world, in a male world. Being vulnerable is a sign of weakness. Now, this isn't the belief that I hold the antithesis of this. For me, vulnerability is power, and I'll go into that in a moment. In fact, the workshops that I run, the vast majority of them are predicated on the principle that vulnerability is power, and through vulnerability, we are able to be this grandest version of self, for ourselves and for others, for the evolution of our own path and for the evolution of others. As beautifully said, Catherine, vulnerability bridges true connection. And it truly does. And it's intimately linked to compassion and empathy. And compassion and empathy are very much what is required in this society, in the way we are at the moment, where we're so disconnected from having or expressing a softness and openness of heart. Now, empathy and compassion is not all that is required in this society. In order to reach a homeostasis, a socio-cultural homeostasis. But that's a conversation for another time, or maybe a little bit later on in the live feed. But right now, we're speaking to vulnerability. We are not raised as men to be vulnerable, or that is an admirable trait to maintain within us or to express. It really is associated with weakness, and weakness is a direct threat to our self-preservation and to our masculinity. Now, masculinity is described differently in various cultures, but there is a thread, there is an undercurrent to masculinity, especially in a Western culture. Devoid of feeling, stoic, courageous, physically strong or dominant, aggressive behavior. A leader must always lead, cannot show weakness or softness or vulnerability. does not engage in the realm of the esoteric, is very materially grounded, so has a materialistic view of the world. These are some of the parameters that define being a man. Independent and hyper independent. So we begin to observe these extreme expressions of these character traits that I've just gone through, that I've just mentioned, yeah? And if you can understand or rather resonate with that, and you've seen that in your own life, perhaps in your father, perhaps in your brother, perhaps in your community, in your friends, in your lovers, your partners, please place a number 3 in the comment box. Absolutely, Karuna, must be in control. That's a strong masculine trait that we're taught that if we are out of control, we are weak. Or that if we are out of control, we are not real men. That we must control our circumstances, our situations. And Emma asks, why do men feel the need to overcompensate and display these characteristics you've just mentioned? Because we are crucified if we are not. Our manlyhood or our manhood, our manliness is threatened deeply. And from a psycho-emotional perspective, that fucks with our minds. It disorientates us. It emasculates us. It makes us feel less worthy. So if you know behaving in a particular way is going to ostracize you or is going to exclude you from the in-group, you'll behave in a way that will generally maintain you and keep you in the in-group. Keep you included as part of that in-group so there's a social cohesion there. Because from a self-preservation perspective, or a perspective of self-preservation rather, from a neural perspective, an evolutionary perspective, a survival-based perspective that comes from here, we need to be in the in-group for survival, for self-preservation. It's crucial, it's necessary. So society does place a great deal of pressure systemically and unconsciously, more so than anything else, not overtly and openly, on men to be men. Now, here's the thing. We're made of contrast in life, okay? We're made of a be-do energy. We're made of a go-flow energy or a masculine-feminine energy. Masculine-feminine terms are very much overused in today's society and very much misunderstood as well in certain circles. And I'm not criticizing the use of the term. I enjoy using the terms because for me they explain a great deal, but I also come from a place of masculine, feminine energies or expressive states coming from a wholeness of being. They come from the same place. They're not separate within us. And that's why I teach a masculine, feminine whole emergence. And that's probably a slightly different conversation for another time. But we're made of this contrasted energy. Now, when we become extreme in one type of our expression, we become polarized. And if we're polarized, we're moving in an unhealthy manner. Now, this affects deeply the way we treat each other, ourselves, and our loved ones in relationship. And all of a sudden, when we're polarized, we're in void. And our greatest voids determine our greatest values. Sit with that for a moment. Feel that for a moment. Be with that for a moment. That feeling, being energy, that feminine energy, we'll call it. No need to articulate that. No need to break that down, analyze it, systemize it. There's no need for that right now. Just be with that. Reflect on your own personal life experiences. Share them here if you're interested. If you feel the need to, because I promise you there are people that are watching, that are here, that would benefit from your wisdom as well. If you're new to this live feed, place new in the comment box so that we know that you're new and the community can welcome you. And of course, if you're just coming on, number 1 in the comment box. So men need nurturing. Men need to be taught how to love, how to feel, how to be with who they are. Men need, whether some men like it or not, we need women to lead. We need women to lead with their hearts and show us and demonstrate to us how to love, again, self. Now, here's the conversation piece around that. women have sacrificed so much for epochs of time. And they have given so much. And I acknowledge that with all of my heart, with all of my being and everything that I am. And I know it may sound like I, on behalf of all men, conscious and unconscious men, aware and unaware men, because I was deeply an unaware man, I know it may sound like I'm asking a great deal. But I'm a big believer in two wrongs don't make a right. And if we keep oscillating between extreme expressions of self and of the way we choose to relate to each other and to earth, we are simply all going to collectively suffer. Because the globe is made of, in humanity anyway, 50% men, 50% women, or 52% women, 48% men, 50-50 roughly, in terms of our population. So women, I'm asking you if you can step up like you have for so long amongst suppression and oppression and ostracization, being ostracized, being minimized. If you could step up for one more time and be what men need you to be, it would be a blessing for the journey of humanity, yeah? And that's where we begin to share a vision, as Tara has said, for the greater collective consciousness. And we can journey together. Because men are deeply missing this. They're deeply missing this ability to connect emotionally with themselves and with women. And the work needs to start within oneself, always. Men need to do the work within themselves. They have to go deep. They have to explore. They have to delve into the chasms of the mystery of their own selves. They have to move through the darkness. It's absolutely fucking necessary. We cannot expect women to take the lead and us to just follow blindly, without deep intention, without sincerity, without connection, understanding, self-guidance, self-propelled guidance. It's imperative that we do that as men. Number 4 in the comment box if you can resonate with that. So what do men need in order to feel, give and receive love? We need that loving touch of a woman. We need that understanding. We need the ability, the intuitive feminine ability to be able to see through our own bullshit and hold us strong in that bullshit and say, no. Be you. Shine. Be the most authentic version of you. And do that in such a way that you are empowered. This is so deeply important. Matt, welcome, brother. Rosie, it's so beautiful to have you here. Divine Feminine Goddess. So, in order for us to receive real love, to receive truth, real love from ourselves, we must have our hearts open, cracked open. And I'm going to say very openly that for most men, they will not be able to do that on their own. We're relational beings. It's not really possible to do that on our own. That in a realm of duality that doesn't really exist too much. It doesn't really exist at all. So we need that lead. We need to be able to see that example in our environment, in our relationships. We need to be able to embrace that, be inspired by that. And as we become inspired by that, we grow and we expand. And Francesca says they are terrified and just exit the situation. Elaborate, please, Francesca, on that if you don't mind. That would be awesome. So when we're asking why men behave the way they do, we've very much gone through that. And we've looked at the historical conditioning and the patterning and the habitual behaviors that we've engaged in as a patriarchal society that has enabled men to distance themselves from their own authentic nature. That has enabled men to be hypocritical. That has enabled men to be aberrant and apathetic and distant because we've disconnected from our emotions. We've disconnected from our faculties of empathy and compassion. Our attentive neural circuitry has gone elsewhere as opposed to going within, and as opposed to focusing on relating consciously and openly. Okay. So most men, when they see, they observe, and by the way, what I've just said then, number 5 in the comment box if you can resonate with that. Most men, when they begin to observe their vulnerability from a place of within, it's a shock. They run. And you're right, Francesca. And what that means is it does feel so unsafe because it feels so foreign. We're so unaware of that. So we fight, flight, freeze. That's what we do. That's what we do when we're in fear. When we're disconnected, when we're in fear, when we're in shock, that's what we do. We fight, flight, freeze. Now what happens is, and this is a really interesting point, is when we move into that space of vulnerability, we then it's too unfamiliar, so we want to move into what is familiar. So in order to do that, in order to make sure we feel safe and secure, because men don't like feeling unsafe, right? It's a sign of weakness and it's just not fucking pleasant for most of us. And most of us just don't know how to deal with that lack of feeling safe. We then oscillate to an extreme. So we'll behave in a way that is hyper-aggressive or hyper-masculine or hyper-distant or hyper-isolated or hyper-independent. And that causes a greater ridge between ourselves and our authentic nature and our relationships. And it really begins to destroy and break down our relationships, yeah? And we partake in narcissistic behavior, very selfish behavior that is isolated and self-absorbed because it keeps us safe. Yet it's not what we truly want, right? It's not what we truly desire from a place of depth and clarity. But our clarity is so murky because of the social conditioning. Our clarity is so murky, is so disorientated because of our habitual experiences around how we should be in life. And what we've just been exposed to and what we've chosen to expose ourselves to. So men need to take responsibility for their actions and for the collective and individual actions. That's a given. That needs to happen. Needs to happen. That's a starting point. If we don't do that as men, we're losing our connection. We're losing our connection to self. We're losing our connection to the beautiful people in our lives, to the beautiful relationships that we may cultivate. This is so important. So then we begin to observe as men, once we begin to take responsibility for ourselves and our actions and who we are and how we choose to move through the world, we then have a capacity to observe our strengths and our weaknesses as individuals and as a collective. Now this becomes quite important. So, beautiful people out there, please, perhaps list some of the strengths that you feel that a strong, empowered, embodied, whole, conscious man holds within him. What are some of those healthy traits that a man can hold within him? And then express them openly. Share that with me, with us, with the community, please. That would be wonderful. That would be deeply appreciated. Because the collective wisdom that is here right now far supersedes anything that I can conjure up on my own. Yeah. So let's bring that collective wisdom together and let's speak to this openly. What are the strengths that healthy, conscious men have a capacity to hold? Good boundaries, absolutely, Craig. Absolutely, my brother. Yes. Strong boundaries, healthy boundaries. And to hold boundaries, we must know ourselves. We must have levels of self-awareness. deep levels of self-awareness. Come on, people, what else? What strengths do men hold or can hold or have a capacity to hold within them? Honesty, integrity, trust, loyalty, joy, presence, yes. Consistent behavior, openly expresses their feeling. Consistency in behavior is so important. Jada, welcome, hello. Consistency in anything that we do is so important. Being present, holding presence, yes, commitment. Commitment to ideas, commitment to beliefs, commitment to purpose, commitment to self, commitment to relationship, integrity in word, vulnerability. It's a powerful, strong trait for men to hold within themselves. Presence, expressiveness and empathy, communication, truthful to self and others, yes. Humility, compassion, empathy and selflessness, absolutely. Most people lack consistency because we live in such a fast-paced world. Again, another product of our society, a lack of consistency in our expression, a lack of consistency in maintaining and holding of our beliefs, courage when triggered to remain centered, in balance and in control and in harmony within self. So having emotional intelligence and cultivating emotional control. Shiva, consciousness, presence, Rosie, beautiful. Openness, yes, openness with self, with ideas, with beliefs, with who we are as people, yeah? Pandeli, I love you. Humility, less egocentric behavior, absolutely. Coming from a place of truth and congruency, self-worth, self-validation, vulnerability. Pandeli, I never forget anything. I remember everything. Compassion and empathy. These are beautiful, beautiful points. Beautiful points that we're making, and relative, relevant, empowered points. Now, if men are able to connect to this, if men are able to connect to this way of being, to this expression, imagine for a moment what that would do for their own relationship to self, how they would treat self. Because many men, and I know this because I work with men deeply and I am a man and I've been that person, we have an inner harsh tonality, a voice that is negative and so aberrant. And that inner voice is so strong at times, it affects the way we treat others, and we treat others in the same way, the way we treat ourselves within. We're so disconnected from this, and we're so up here. And sometimes the way we think and feel about ourselves is so harsh, is so it's critiqued with such aberrance, with such anger and aggression, that we're not good enough, that we haven't done enough, that we haven't been enough, that we are not a man enough, that we are not achieving this, that we should be this or we should be that. And we treat others in the same way. And our relationships begin to break down because they become based on conflict. They become based on superficiality. The essence of who we are is not really expressed and experienced and felt. Now, what are some of the weaknesses, perceived weaknesses that men carry? And now, I'll relate this to unhealthy men. So what are some of the weaknesses that unhealthy men, in their own expression, in their own posturing, carry in, specifically now, in intimate relationship and in relationship to self? This becomes interesting because this is where the majority of men sit. This is where the vast majority of men reside, in this space. In the space of being unhealthy. But what are some of those character traits? What are some of those expressive faculties that make men unhealthy, allow men to engage with others, especially in intimate partnership, in an unhealthy way? Now remember what we said about consistency. Consistency in any expression, in any area of life. If it's consistent, that area or that expressive state, that behavior, that habit becomes pronounced. Remember that. Consistency works both ways, for what is healthy for us and what is unhealthy. So what are some of these... Erotic IQ, I love it, Jada. Very true as well. Wow, lots of... Sorry, I missed all these... I missed all these comments. For some reason, it didn't come through. Disconnected, aggressive when they feel threatened, selfishness, apathy, egocentric, too much, emotionally blocked, disrespectful, full of pride, egocentric, look outside of themselves for satisfaction. So immediate sense of satisfaction, using drugs or alcohol, sex to fill a void. So using externalities to fill a void. Absolutely, these are all common character traits of unhealthy men. And again, when we look at the behavior of men in so many different ways, we are able to observe the systemic pressure that is placed on men to be a particular way. We look at our media, we look at pornography, we look at the short-term gratification society we are cultivating for ourselves. Beck says projection, blame, anger, frustration. Projection's a huge one. Blame, externalizing our blame. We do not take responsibility. Unhealthy men will not take responsibility for who they are. And at its extreme, absolutely, violence, excessive controlling behavior, which becomes abusive, becomes deeply abusive. Mistrust of women, possessiveness and control, definitely. And that's men coming from... When you see that, when you observe that in a man, when you observe that control, that necessity to be violent, to be aberrant, to be abusive, it's because we are scared. So deeply scared. And the biggest problem that ties all this together, and Karuna has said this, is, and I mentioned this earlier, is not taking responsibility for our behavior. Because we're disconnected in our behavior, we almost become sociopaths. And it's almost accepted that men are sociopaths or able to display sociopathic tendencies, where one of those character traits is completely disconnected from our behaviors, as if it doesn't happen. And that's exactly right. Craig, Nicole, Catherine, fear-driven. It's a cry for help, and we are operating from a wounded aspect of self because we haven't dealt with it, because we have not been allowed to. We have been told multiple times over that, guess what? Being a man does not involve looking at the self within, does not involve connecting to our feeling state, does not involve looking at our emotional selves. Now, I'm not blaming here, because all of us need to take responsibility for ourselves. Now, to speak to aggression for a moment, and this is interesting, because there's nothing wrong with being angry. There's nothing wrong with being upset. It's how we express that. When it becomes uncontrollable aggression, it's not gauged, it's not understood. The feeling isn't really being felt. We are being reactive to life as opposed to being responsive. There is a deep lack of self-awareness. There's a lack of self-control because there is no understanding of self. Because we are just taught as men, fix the problem, get aggressive, finish it, be done with it, done. And that's the paradox, Emma. That is the paradox, yeah? And remember, we bring into our lives what we need to look at the most. We all do that as people. You need to sit with that for a moment. We bring into our lives what we need to observe the most within ourselves. If you can resonate with that, place a number 6 in the comment box. And thank you for your wisdom around sharing what unhealthy expressive men look like, how they behave, how they move through the world. Good morning, Tracy. Beautiful to have you here. So how do we do that, Tracy? That's a beautiful question. How do we encourage a man to look inside himself without rescuing him? Because rescuing him or trying to fix him will not help him, nor you, nor society. We have to do the work ourselves. And the answer is, or the response to that is guidance. It is leadership. Lead yourself. As a woman, as a man, it's irrelevant. Lead yourself with great authenticity and reverence, with clarity and wisdom, and be a beacon of inspired light for others. And as you do that, as you embody that, you can only hope that others will do the same. But it is out of your locus of control, whether they do or not. It's not your responsibility to do that, to save anybody. But the more self-awareness we cultivate within ourselves, the greater the opportunity for people to look within themselves, heal themselves, observe their weaknesses, deficiencies, voids, whatever you wish to call, wounding, pain, fear, all of the above and more, the greater the propensity for them to do that. And then people will eventually reach out for support. Let them know that you're there. Tracy, I hope that helps a little bit. We are each other's mirrors deeply, especially in intimate relationship. Definitely an intimate relationship, yeah? You can lead a horse to water, but you cannot make that horse drink. It is as simple as that, and it is a beautiful truth. It is a beautiful truth. And Tara says, I honestly feel the quality of our relationships is determined by what we tolerate also. Setting healthy boundaries for ourselves, again, leads and lends itself back into self-awareness. How well do you know yourself? Your beliefs, your ideals, your ideologies, what you will tolerate, your values, what you won't tolerate, your likes, your dislikes, your preferences in life, your favorite food. All of that is so important, especially food. I'm a foodie. I like food. So we look at the dark side. The dark side of human relating. And this is actually simple. This is actually simpler than we think. The dark side of human relating. The dark side of relationships. The reason, or the reasons, one of the reasons why food equals life, yes. Number 7 for that, food equals life. The simple things, yeah? The simple things in life. Just on a side tangent for a moment. I was with a beautiful client today and I said, you know what? Let's just stop. Let's go for a walk. We're going to just go for a walk. And I'm very blessed where I live, yeah? I live in one of the most amazing places in the world. And my Melburnian friends would probably disagree. They think that they live in the world's most livable city. Jaguar. I would disagree with that. But nevertheless, let our Melbourne friends have that for the interim. But I said, let's just go for a walk. And she was feeling a little bit entrapped, just within herself, just in life in general. So I said, let's go for a walk. And went up to a place called Monument Hill. And in Monument Hill, we have a 180-degree view of our port, our harbour. It's all ocean. It's beautiful. It's magnificent. It's one of the most beautiful places in the world. It truly is. And I say that from being fairly well-travelled. And there was just so much expansiveness. It was amazing. And she instantly felt better. I felt better. Remember, this is just a random, this is on a tangent now, yes? It's nothing really to do with anything. And well, it's got a lot to do with gratitude, appreciation for where we are. And when we're able to move into that space, so this is something, if men practice this, they will be able to connect to their authentic nature with greater efficacy. So it has got something to do with something. That connection piece is just amazing. Santa Barbara is beautiful, Tia. Yes, absolutely. And I've been there a couple of times. It is an amazing place. So when we're able to be appreciative for where we are and what we have. We open our minds and our hearts. We open to the possibility of new information streaming through to us. We open to the possibility of being highly creative, yeah? So back to the darkness or the dark side of relationships. Effectively, when our shadow self is not observed and we bring this lack of deep awareness, this unconscious attitude, this unconscious self into relationship, we can hit some pretty dark places and we cannot navigate them. That's the problem. So conscious people still go into dark places, but their ability to navigate that darkness occurs with far greater efficacy, far greater awareness, far greater peacefulness, a far greater knowing, connection to self, a confidence, a courage. But when two people come together and they're carrying a great deal of darkness, that becomes dangerous for the relationship, but it becomes dangerous for that mirroring aspect of self. You like that word, Joni, efficacy? Yeah, it's one of my faves. So that mirroring aspect of self becomes distorted, becomes dark, it becomes murky, it becomes violent even, there's a lot of friction and tension because people, individuals, and especially men, okay, in this case, especially men are so disconnected from their darkness because they want to ignore it, because they want to be polarized. They don't know they want to be polarized, but they only want to grasp the good. They only want to grasp the great. They don't want to look at the ugly side of life, but it's actually not that ugly. It's beautiful. It's revealing. I was very blessed a couple of weeks ago, speaking of Melburnian friends, to do some very deep work with a beautiful soul in Melbourne who assisted me in going deep into another version of self, another element of the shadow self that was deeply confronting and deeply painful, and I'm still moving through that. But the gratitude I have for making that obvious, for making that conscious, for allowing myself to be aware of that, and for it being facilitated by a trusted, revered and respected source is so powerful for my own growth and what I bring to the world. How then I choose to now consciously relate with other people. How I choose consciously to relate to the beautiful people in my life. Of course, women inclusive. And it's liberating. It's simultaneously confronting and scary as fuck, but liberating. That's powerful. The dark side of relationships is our shadow self, our wounded self, the aspects of self we have chosen to ignore for so long. And it's a journey. It's not asking a few questions and writing down a few answers and saying, hey, I just made my unconscious conscious, I'm in the light. It's not about that, right? It's definitely not about that. It's so much more than that. But it begins somewhere, yeah? It begins with an acknowledgement. And men really struggle with this. Men really struggle to think that they are wrong, or that there is something bad about them, or that they are sick or unhealthy or not well, or that they have these distorted expressions of self. Because again, we're taught to be perfect, and women are taught and raised to be perfect in their own way as well, through societal conditioning, through familial norms. It's just expressed in a different way, it presents in a different way, yeah? So how do we bring clarity? How do we bring emerging to our relationships with reference to the darkness? Is make the dark light, make it known, make it malleable, make the unconscious conscious. It's a journey, it's a process though, and it doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen in a matter of minutes. It probably it happens over years, but that's the beauty of, that's the unfolding. And with every element that unfolds, we connect just a little bit more to ourselves. And courage is correct, Francesca. We need courage to surrender, and we need vulnerability to surrender. And let me tell you something, it's easy to ignore our stuff. It's easy to ignore our pain and our fear. It requires power and courage to step into our vulnerable selves, to face our fears, our pains, and our challenges. And that's why vulnerability is so powerful in its most simplistic level. It gives meaning and fulfillment to our lives because it allows us to view life from a perspective of wholeness and fullness. Give me number 8 in the comment box if you can resonate with that. And Betty, you just share, I'm not sure how actually, we just share it basically. There should be a share button there, and you can share it in a send a message, or you can share it on your what's it called? I got a mental block. You can share it on your page and tag that person in there. But you're right, Emma. We all have baggage that we've accumulated for so many years, over our formative years, especially during that hypnagogic state where we're just walking through the world, absorbing everything, literally everything. So men that are out there, and there need to be more men on this live feed, and I hope we're able to share this. Beautiful people, if you resonate with this message, share. Share it on your wall, share it with your loved ones, share it in a private message, just share it, yeah? If you resonate with it, of course. So men, we need to wake up. We need to assume responsibility. Craig, to truly know what we are capable in dark behaviour is very scary. It is. It is. But if we don't face those fears, they become us. They run our lives. And they run the way that we behave with people, especially the women in our lives. And we continue the same old habitual patterning of disconnection, of separation, of segregation. And if we always do what we've always done, we shall always receive what we have always got. Thank you, Aliki. Thank you so much. We must assume responsibility for ourselves. It's where it begins. But we must be aware to do so. We must somehow, the more we openly communicate to this and express to these issues, the more someone will pick up a snippet of something and say, wow, that maybe explains why I've been feeling this way. That maybe explains why every relationship I have had has deteriorated in a particular way. Wow. Maybe I should look at that because, yes, it's familiar and familiarity is comfortable and comfort is safety, but I don't want this life anymore. And when we get to that point, we're ready to make change and deeply transform. That's the power. And we all have that opportunity. We all have that option. We all have that power within us. So women, be there, please, shining your wisdom on the many men that need it, and don't give up on us too quickly, because I know from the beautiful people that I work with, both men and women, there is love and there is hope within all of us. And we just simply need an opportunity to feel that, to know that it exists. And sometimes we learn a little bit slow as men, and we need that patience. But of course, my guidance and my advice is to always set healthy boundaries for yourself. And if something does not serve you, then move away. Shift. I'm going to love you and leave you there. I'm going to say thank you so much for being here. I'm going to say I'm deeply grateful for your presence, for your wisdom, for your contribution. If you're new, by the way, to this live feed, just place new in the comment box so that we know that you're new and the community can welcome you. And of course, please feel free to share this video if, thank you, Emma, and please feel free to share this video if it resonates with you and if you feel connected to the message, of course. And thank you once again for your commentary and your input and your wisdom and your shared thoughts and feelings and so forth. And I shall see you again, I am sure, in the next couple of days. Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Francesca. Jody, thank you. And many blessings on your evening, your day, wherever you may be in the world. And I hope that you have got something from this melody. Always a gift to spend time with you as well. Thank you, Natalie. Thank you. Thank you, Beck. Thank you to all. And I shall see you soon. And just one thing, I'll just leave you with one thing. Catherine, Betty, thank you. Natasha, thank you. I'll leave you, Tracy, thank you. I'm humbled and honoured, and really, it's so beautiful stuff. Thank you to really feel the wisdom that is emanating from all of you here this evening. I really feel that, and I'm really grateful for that. But I'll leave you with something, yeah, is potentially, maybe, perhaps, there is a man in your life that is screaming for help. And you know that he's screaming for help. And you also know that he's stuck in his ways. Perhaps just be there in presence. Just be there. Let him know in your own way. Thank you, Gail, that you are there for him and he is supported. And in that support, he may relax and open to his true, authentic self. And one last thing I forgot to mention. Next Wednesday evening, I believe it's the 27th, Wednesday evening the 27th, if you're in Perth, Western Australia, myself and Mark Reid, we're running a beautiful 2.5, 3 hour workshop on conscious relating. And we'll speak to some of this and go into greater depth as well on conscious relating as well and what that looks like in today's world for both men and women. So I hope to see you there if you're there, and all the details are on my Facebook page. Many blessings to you once again. Thank you so much, and I'll see you again soon.